A 54-year-old software engineer named Gary didn't leave his marriage during a screaming match. He left on a Wednesday afternoon while his wife was at yoga class. 27 years of marriage, 2 grown kids, a paid-off house in the suburbs. He packed one suitcase, left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter, and drove to an extended-stay hotel 15 miles away. When his wife called that evening, panicked and confused, he answered calmly. "I need you to listen carefully," he said. "I'm not coming back. This isn't negotiable. I'm sorry, but I'm finished." 3 years later, Gary lives alone in a small coastal town, works remotely, surfs most mornings, and says he's never been happier. His ex-wife still tells people she woke up one day married to a stranger. But the real story, Gary had been a stranger to himself for 2 decades. We're digging into this at Psyche Shift because these situations are becoming more common, and almost nobody understands what's actually driving them. Let's get into the psychology behind why men over 50 are walking away from long marriages without hesitation or remorse. You know what's wild about these situations? Everyone thinks they come out of nowhere. The wife is blindsided. The adult children are shocked. Friends say they seemed fine just last month. But the reality? Most of these men have been quietly keeping score for 15 to 25 years, not in a malicious way. More like a subconscious spreadsheet running in the background of their minds, tallying every moment they disappeared a little more. Take a guy I'll call Vincent. Vincent spent his late 30s through early 50s doing everything right according to the manual he was handed. His wife wanted to stay home with the kids. He worked extra shifts. She wanted to go back to school. He covered everything financially and picked up more household responsibilities. Her mother got sick. He drove 3 hours every weekend to help with care while his wife coordinated. Medical appointments. Every decision point, Vincent chose whatever made life easier for everyone else. Seemed noble, right? Except nobody ever asked Vincent what he was giving up. He stopped running marathons because training time felt selfish. He turned down a job opportunity in Colorado because his wife didn't want to leave her book club and Pilates studio. He sold his motorcycle because she worried about safety. Each choice seemed rational in the moment. But stretched across 20 years, Vincent became unrecognizable to himself. The accumulation wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet erosion, like wind slowly carving away at rock, until there's nothing substantial left. What gets me about this pattern? By the time these guys hit 50, they can't point to one terrible thing their spouse did. There's no villain. There's just this crushing realization that they've been living someone else's preferred version of their life for decades. And that realization, once it lands fully, changes everything. Now let's talk about something that makes this even more complicated. These men become incredibly skilled at looking fine, not just to their wives, but to themselves too. Psychologists have this term called adaptive disconnect, where you learn to separate from your actual feelings because acknowledging them would disrupt everything. So you keep showing up, keep performing, keep being reliable. On the outside, you're the steady guy everyone counts on. On the inside, you're numb. Consider someone like Alan. Alan described his marriage as functional for years. No major fights, no infidelity. They had dinner together most nights, split household tasks reasonably, attended their kids' events together. From the outside, they looked like partners. But Alan noticed something around age 48. He realized conversations with his wife had become entirely logistical. Who's picking up the dry cleaning? What time is the dentist appointment? Did you call the plumber about the leak? When? Was the last time they talked about ideas, dreams, fears, anything that mattered beneath the surface management of daily life? Alan genuinely couldn't remember. What's fascinating is how long you can run on this kind of autopilot. Years, decades even. You tell yourself this is just what mature marriage looks like. The butterflies and deep conversations are for young people. This is real life. Except here's the thing. That story only works until it doesn't. Until one morning you wake up and realize you're 52 years old, probably got 25 decent years left if you're lucky, and you're spending them in a relationship that feels more like roommates managing a logistics company than two people who actually care about each other's inner worlds. The mask doesn't crack during a big dramatic moment, it cracks during something painfully ordinary. Alan's moment came when he mentioned wanting to learn piano. His wife said, "At your age, that seems like a lot of effort for something you'll probably quit." Not mean-spirited, just practical. But in that moment, Alan heard the underlying message. Your desires are inconvenient and probably foolish. And he realised she'd been sending that message in small ways for 20 years. He'd just been too busy performing good husband to notice. Here's where the psychology gets really interesting. There's this concept researchers study called sunk cost fallacy. The idea that we continue investing in something because we've already invested so much, even when it's clearly not working. But something unique happens to men in their 50s. They start doing different math. Instead of looking backward at what they've invested, they start looking forward at what they have left. Imagine a man named Carlos. Carlos is 56. If he's lucky, he's got 20 to 30 years before serious health decline. Maybe 40 if he's blessed with good genetics. So he starts asking himself uncomfortable questions. Do I want to spend the next 20 years exactly like the last 20? Coming home to someone who knows my schedule but not my thoughts? Having the same surface-level conversations about yard work and grocery lists? Watching my preferences get dismissed as cute but impractical? When you frame it that way, the decision becomes less about leaving a marriage and more about reclaiming whatever time remains. It's not emotional anymore. It's almost mathematical. These men aren't fleeing in anger. They're departing with quiet certainty. They've weighed what they're losing, the shared history, the financial convenience, the social acceptability, against what they're gaining: autonomy, possibility, and the chance to remember who they are beyond their function in someone else's life. What catches everyone off guard is how quickly they move once the decision is made. Years of slow accumulation, then suddenly they're packed and gone within days. Why? Because once the math shift, staying one more day feels intolerable. It's like they've been holding their breath underwater for 2 decades, and they just broke the surface. Going back down isn't an option, no matter who's begging them to reconsider. So what actually happens after they leave? This is the part that contradicts every cultural narrative we have about how this should unfold. We expect these guys to crash and burn, to realise they made a horrible mistake, to come back apologetic and humbled, but that's not what typically happens at all. Remember Gary from the beginning? He's living in a 700 square foot apartment. He eats peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. He does his own laundry, grocery shopping, cleaning. His ex-wife assumed he'd be miserable handling basic life tasks he'd relied on her for. Instead, Gary described something completely different. He said, "Everything is mine now. The mess is mine. The decisions are mine. The quiet is mine. I'm not negotiating about what to watch on TV or where to set the thermostat or how to spend my Saturday. I forgot what it feels like to not be constantly managing someone else's expectations." What's really fascinating? These men often describe feeling guilty about how good they feel. Like they should be sadder. They should miss the marriage more. They should regret the upheaval. But they don't. They feel lighter, more energized, more themselves than they've been in decades. One guy I heard about started painting at 59, something he'd loved in college but abandoned as impractical. Another started hiking portions of the Appalachian Trail. Another joined a community theatre group. These aren't distractions from pain. These are men remembering what it feels like to want something and just do it, without running it through a committee or justifying why it matters. The loneliness they expected, it's there sometimes. Quiet evenings can feel heavy. Holidays are weird. But most of them say the loneliness of being alone is nothing compared to the loneliness they felt being married. At least now, the loneliness is honest. They're not pretending to be connected while feeling completely isolated. Let's dig into something uncomfortable that these situations expose. Most marriages operate on an unspoken exchange system. It's not romantic to talk about, but it's real. Each person brings something to the table and implicitly expects something in return. For a lot of these long-term marriages, the exchange went something like this. He provides financial stability, home repairs, and steady reliability. She provides domestic management, social coordination, and emotional caretaking. Sounds fair enough in theory, right? But here's what often happened. Over the years, his side of the exchange stayed pretty consistent. He kept working, kept earning, kept fixing things, kept being dependable. Her side evolved as needs changed. Kids grew up, routines shifted, priorities transformed. But his needs, those often got frozen in time or dismissed entirely. Nobody checked in to ask if the exchange still felt balanced to him. Nobody wondered if he might need something different than he did at 30. Take someone like James. James realized at 55 that his wife knew everything about his professional schedule, his medical appointments, his car maintenance needs. She could tell you exactly when his last dentist visit was or which prescription needed refilling, but she couldn't tell you the last time he felt genuinely happy. She couldn't name a single thing he dreamed about beyond the practical logistics of their shared life. Not because she was a bad person, but because somewhere along the way, they'd both silently agreed that his inner world wasn't part of the transaction. His job was to function smoothly in his assigned role. Her job was to manage the household system. Anything beyond that felt like asking for more than the agreement covered. This is what makes these departures so confusing to the wives. From their perspective, the agreement was being honoured. He was fed, his clothes were clean, his life was organised. What more did he want? But from his perspective, the agreement itself had become a cage. He wasn't a person anymore. He was a function. And at 50-something, watching time speed up, being a function stopped being enough. Here's something that happens consistently after these men leave. Everyone assumes they're having a breakdown. The ex-wife tells friends he's lost his mind. Adult children worry he's going through some crisis. Co-workers wonder if the stress finally got to him. But when you actually talk to these guys, they describe something closer to the opposite. Not a breakdown, a breakthrough. There's this psychological concept called ego integrity versus despair that Erik Erikson identified. Basically, as people age, they face a developmental crisis. Do I look back at my life with satisfaction, or do I fall into despair about missed opportunities and unfulfilled potential? For these men walking away, the marriage had become the obstacle to achieving that integrity. Staying meant accepting despair, acknowledging that they'd spend their entire lives performing a role that crushed their actual self. Leaving became the path to integrity, choosing authenticity even when it's costly and complicated. Consider what happens to someone like Nathan. Nathan left at 53 and everyone thought he was spiraling. He quit his corporate job and started doing freelance consulting. He moved to a smaller town where he didn't know anyone. He stopped attending family functions where his ex-wife would be present. From the outside, it looked like chaos. But Nathan described it as the first time in 30 years he was building a life based on what he actually valued rather than what he was supposed to value. The transformation confuses people because it doesn't match the script we expect. We think people who blow up their lives should look haunted and regretful. These guys often look relaxed and focused in a way they haven't in decades. They're not running away from responsibility, they're running toward agency. And once you understand that distinction, the whole situation makes more sense. You want to know what's tragic about a lot of these situations? Many of these men say they would have stayed if things had been different earlier, not at the end when their wife panicked and offered to change everything. But years before, when small interventions might have mattered, they describe moments where they tried to communicate, tried to express needs, tried to be seen as something beyond their role, and those moments got dismissed, minimized, or turned into conflicts they were too tired to pursue. There's a guy named Ben who left at 58. Ben said he told his wife multiple times over the years that he felt disconnected from her, that their conversations felt superficial, that he missed feeling like partners who actually cared about each other's thoughts and dreams. Each time she heard it as criticism and got defensive. Or she'd acknowledge it briefly, Maybe make an effort for a week or two, then everything would slide back to the established pattern. After the 10th or 12th time of trying to raise the issue and getting nowhere, Ben just stopped bringing it up. He accepted that this was how it would be and started the long process of detaching emotionally. By the time Ben actually left, his wife was ready to go to counselling, read books, change everything. But Ben was already gone emotionally. He'd tried for years when it might have made a difference. Now he was just tired. He didn't want to work on the marriage anymore. He wanted to be done working. And that's what people don't understand about timing. These men don't leave at the peak of their frustration. They leave after the frustration has burned out completely and turned into indifference. By then, promises of change don't matter, because the desire for the relationship itself has evaporated. Let's talk about something that's hard to articulate but runs through all these stories. At their core, these departures are about one devastating realization. I am not seen. Not as a complete human, not as someone with an inner life that matters, not as someone whose desires and dreams deserve space and consideration. I am seen as a role, a provider, a problem solver, a reliable constant, but not as a person. Think about what that does to someone over decades. Every day you show up as yourself, with thoughts, feelings, frustrations, hopes, fears, and the person closest to you consistently relates to you as a function. They need things from you. They expect things from you. They appreciate when you deliver what's expected. But they don't see you. They don't ask who you are underneath all the roles you play. They don't wonder what you're dreaming about or struggling with or yearning for beyond the practical necessities of shared life. By 50, some men realize they've been invisible in their own marriages for so long that they've started to disappear even to themselves. They can't remember what they want because wanting things outside their assigned function has been discouraged for decades. They've learned to compress themselves into whatever shape the marriage required, leaving no room for anything that doesn't serve the established system. The walk away isn't about punishing anyone. It's about a primal need to be seen again, even if that means being seen only by yourself in an empty apartment. At least there's honesty in that. At least you're not pretending connection exists where there's only transaction. So what are we supposed to take from all this? Because I'm not here to tell you marriage is terrible, or that men are victims, or any simplistic narrative. What these situations reveal is something more complex and more important. Long-term relationships require both people to remain interested in who the other person is becoming, not just who they were when you met. These marriages didn't fail because of one bad person. They failed because both people stopped paying attention. They got comfortable with the routine. They assumed stability meant success. They stopped asking real questions and listening to real answers. Over time, they built a smooth-running machine that managed a household and raised kids and maintained social appearances. But they forgot to maintain the actual human connection underneath all that machinery. The men who walk away at 50 plus aren't making a statement about marriage in general. They're making a statement about their specific marriage and their specific life. They're saying, I'd rather be alone and authentic than partnered and invisible. I'd rather have uncertainty and possibility than security and slow death. I'd rather spend my remaining years discovering who I am than spend them performing who I'm supposed to be. And here's what's really striking. Most of them don't regret the years they stayed. They don't vilify their ex-wives. They don't trash the marriage to anyone who'll listen. They just quietly build different lives and don't look back because looking back feels like drowning. They're too busy learning to breathe freely, probably for the first time since their 20s. If there's a lesson in all this, it's pretty straightforward. Pay attention to the person you're with. Not just their schedule and their tasks and their function in your life. Pay attention to their inner world. Ask what they're thinking about. Wonder what they dream of. Notice when they're fading. Create space for them to be complex and changing and sometimes inconvenient. Because the alternative is waking up one day to find they've simply vanished while you weren't looking. And by then, it's not a problem you can solve. It's just over.